right, SharePoint Conference 2009, recap basically a day two. We got Wes Preston here, and then we're going to get some food. So make this quick, Wes. What was your day like?
It was pretty good. I had a couple of sessions. One was on social computing. That one was more of a high-level overview of what social computing was all about, not necessarily SharePoint-specific stuff. I'm pretty sure that all of the material that he covered is going to be straight from his slides, so Brian and I kind of lost interest halfway through that one. There's another session on document management that talked a lot about features that people are going to hear a lot about from all kinds of different sources. Obviously, it's a major part of SharePoint, so you'll hear a lot about that. But what I really was excited about today was something that wasn't necessarily SharePoint specific. It was about Windows Server 2008 R2, something called the file classification infrastructure. And what the session was all about was talking about how file shares and SharePoint need to coexist, and what are the different things that each of them offers. We hear a lot about the reasons to go from moving your documents from a file share into SharePoint, getting into things like check-in, check-out, version control, and metadata and things like that. What's changing with this new file classification infrastructure is that without even coming into SharePoint, you've got the ability to assign metadata, you've got the ability to apply policies, and you've got the ability to do workflow types of actions on the files before they even come into SharePoint, just when they're in the file system. So all by itself, that's pretty cool, but what's going to be even more interesting is how they're going to work in a migration scenario and in a scenario where they're coexisting, which obviously is what the session was about. So people are going to be able to, before they even migrate to 2010, start thinking about their taxonomies, start thinking about how they're going to apply metadata to files, and actually get those things set up before they bring it into SharePoint. So while you're doing parallel efforts of putting the 2010 migration from your old SharePoint system together, generally migrations are going to be moving from an old SharePoint system as well as moving content from an external source like file shares. So they can have parallel efforts both on the SharePoint side and on the file system side to start applying those pieces, and then also automate the migrations. So the migrations might be all at once, using policies and workflows and moving things into SharePoint all by themselves, or they can be over time. The other cool feature, there's a lot of cool features about how you're going to pull these things together, but one of the ones that was probably jumped out the most was that you've got a couple of different options. One, do you want to do a full-on migration where you're actually moving files from the file share, deleting them, and then copying them into SharePoint? Or do you want to copy them, so basically just take a copy from the one source and bring it into the other? Or the last one, which I thought was pretty slick, was taking the actual file itself from the file share, moving it into SharePoint, and leaving a link behind on the file share. So not only do you have the content where you can better control it, but you're still leaving the information behind so that when people who are still used to going to the file share can now find their file even though it's in SharePoint. You can also, kind of the second half of that, and probably the last thing I'll talk about right now, is that because you've got these policies that you can apply, you can actually leave the file share as being an active part of your document management strategy, but the policies can be in place to continue to automate those things, automate moving things from the file share into SharePoint so that you can still get all the benefits of the SharePoint side, but not really pull the rug out of under your users who are used to using the file share. So you kind of have the best of both worlds. Those are real high level. I got into a little bit of the details, but what it is it's going to be another tool in our toolbox. So we're going to be able to figure out how that's going to work both in a migration scenario and in an ongoing document management strategy. So again, not a SharePoint specific one. We're talking about Windows Server 2008, but it's pretty neat and it's pretty interesting and exciting stuff for I think some of our users out there and the folks that are already talking about doing migrations. So there we go.
Very cool.